Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Inspired Writer Collective podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth, and today is another guest episode. I am so excited to have Jacci Prior here today because she is an audiobook narrator. And I have been, ever since we started taking guests on this podcast, audiobook narrator has been a box on that list of guests that I wanted to have that I had not been able to check. But once I got active on Threads, that's when I found you, Jacci. You're so active on there and you post so much great stuff. You are such an advocate for the authors that you work with, which I think is so big because not only are they, marketing their own books, but they're getting basically some marketing from the way that you promote yourself and the audiobook that you create and the life that you bring to their story. So that just seems like a win-win to me. I love that for those who are watching this on YouTube, they get to a glimpse into what your setup looks like. You're in your booth now. You've got your headphones. You've got your high-tech microphone and everything. And so thank you for coming on the podcast today and welcome. Please tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be here. This is a lot of fun, and I know we're going to have a great conversation. I guess a little bit about me. I've been a narrator for 3.5 years, I think. I don't know. I'll do the math later. That sounds about right. It might be closer to 4 now. I'm not sure. But I got started. I knew nothing. I was a reader, but I wasn't on Bookstagram or Book Talk or any of those spaces. I knew no one in the industry. I got started because my daughter suggested it. I guess I gave some pretty good retellings of bedtime stories as she was growing up. And because she has dyslexia, we would read together a lot. And it was her idea that I would become one of those book readers that we listened to. And I could not shake the idea from my head. So that led me on this journey. And I discovered Book Talk and then later, or Bookstagram and then Book Talk, and just dove in and have accumulated relationships and coaching and experience and obviously my beautiful portfolio of titles over the years. And I feel like it all just builds on one another in the community I've built. And I'm just so proud of where it is and where it's going. And I know we'll get into all the details a little bit later, but I hope that's an adequate bio. I don't have an acting background. I did some like hobby stage stuff, but my background was in music performance. So there's crossover. There's a love of the stage or any kind of performance platform. I don't know. Take it away with the questions, Elizabeth.
Introduction. Yes, that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you for that. And definitely we're going to be digging into some of the background. That was what made me so interested in talking to someone because when you self-publish your book, a lot of times you're also deciding whether you're going to create an audiobook. And you've put this baby out into the world in written form, and then it becomes this question of like, oh, well, am I going to create my own audiobook? Am I going to hire someone to do the audio for me? What does that even entail? What does that look like? And it was just this whole world that I knew that I had no understanding of. And that's why I wanted to talk to someone like you who could give us who are on the indie publishing or self-publishing journey a little bit of insight into what we could look for, what kind of questions will be asked of us as an author who's seeking out an audiobook narrator. Because as you and I were chatting in our like pre-interview time, there was so much that I didn't even know what options there were and like the process of going through it. So I wonder if you could walk us through like what an author would be considering as they seek out an audiobook narrator for their work.
Sure. So more what they should consider or just a step-by-step kind of bullet point guide or would
Either whatever you
both?
think is best.
Sure. Okay. Well, like you said,
You're the expert here.
like you said, you're here, you have your beautiful little book baby, and you want it to be an audiobook. Different authors have different reasons for wanting their books on audio. Some just love audiobooks, and it's not necessarily about, making money, but for most authors, like you want to see a return on what you've created. So I'm going to speak to it from that mindset of the business mindset. What do you want to look for? A lot of people know there's different routes to getting started. You can find narrators and go for auditions on platforms like ACX, which is very common and has all sorts of payment options that you can use to filter through if the dollar sign is your number one priority. But if you're active in bookish, social medias and you've maybe followed narrators, there is nothing wrong with just sending a little DM to someone you'd love to work with and seeing what their process is like. The process, the step by step, is going to be similar, or it should be similar regardless of who you hire. But each narrator has their own rhythm. And then you collaborate with them when you're producing your audiobook independently. And you get to collaborate and work together and are in communication from before production to the end. Um, I'm trying to think of like what red flags would be. If it were me, I don't know that I would take a chance on someone who has never narrated a book before. Um,
Mm.
so, I mean, everyone has to be given that chance, but I think the things you want to look for are always request an audition and make sure the audio quality matches or is similar to audiobooks that you already listen to. If you're not an audiobook listener, go listen to some samples of books that you would expect would be narrated well, the big titles that are popular in your genre, and then compare that to the auditions that you receive. Um, because if you are hiring someone who's brand new to the industry, you should still want to have a professional sounding end product and
Mhm.
make sure that they're capable of it. I feel like I'm going to call someone out on this, but like, don't, how do I want to say this? Just because a guy on TikTok has an awesome voice doesn't mean he can tell a good story.
Mm.
So I feel like there are people who will take advantage of that. And all I would say is they need to be tested. And I want to see a body of work from them in finished products, not just one voice snippet. And, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I,
Let's diverge from there because there's so much that goes into the voice, right? I mean, it's an instrument and you've got tone, you've got rate of speech, you've got, you know, the how loud or quiet you get to
mhm.
add, significance to a moment. So I just imagine there's a lot that goes into how you articulate um the scene and the emotions and the, author's intent as they've, translated it to you for that chapter into the way that you say those words. It's not just about saying those words in a beautiful voice
Yeah.
or in a resonant voice.
No,
There's
no.
so much that goes into it, which I think could also point to or be a con against using an AI generated
Oh,
voice.
absolutely. I mean, I know it'll probably get there. And I know that right now with AI, the person who has their audiobook generated by AI can go in and individually modify each line of dialogue if they want to. But right now, AI isn't sophisticated enough to do that on its own when it's interpreting
Mm.
your book. Um, but no, it really is an acting job. It's not just reading the book out loud. There's a narrator, any narrator that you work with, you should have the expectation that before they narrate your book that they've read it and hopefully they've prepped it. When I am prepping a book before I record it, I have a PDF and I highlight every line of dialogue, and each character that speaks has a color that's unique to them, and I make notes in the margins, and I'm, reaching out to the author with questions about pronunciations, or if maybe I have a hint that a character who seems good now is going to be a villain in a later book in the series, I'm going to ask that. Um,
Mhm.
there's I try to be really like connected to the story during prep so that when I get in the booth, I know it inside and out and I know where it's going down the road. Um, because, authors often like to put Easter eggs and anyways, but it truly is an acting job if you don't live and breathe those characters and you're not conveying those emotions with your voice in a real way that feels authentic to the listener. It's probably not going to be a very successful audiobook.
And I would just imagine that that saves time then on, like, the later editing piece. If you hire an audiobook narrator and they don't ask you all those upfront questions and they just record it how they think it's
Oh, yeah.
what makes sense to them or how they read it, then there's gonna be so much work you have to do on the back end to make it match the way that you as the author hear it as you read it in your mind, in your
It's
internal
so
voice.
true. It's so true. Before I narrate any book, the author gets a 5 to 15-minute sample of their book, even after the audition. And part of that is to make sure that they hear the tone and the pacing that I'm giving it after having prepped it. And it gives us another chance to be like, hey, are we setting the stage correctly for your story? And just make sure that, especially for things like first person, the narrative feels just as real and on beat with where the story is as the dialogue does. Um, every every word matters. It's all there for a reason. These books have been edited, and authors have spent potentially years building this story and crafting it. And now that it's ready, I just think it all deserves to be honored to the author's intention to the best of our ability.
I love that, and the way you describe that sounds like just such a support for the author. As an author of memoir, it's especially difficult when I think about a future, like, audiobook scenario because when you look at least all the, big name memoirists, everyone uses their own voice, and I get it because it's a very personal story and your voice is a part of your brand and,
Mm-hmm.
you know best how these scenes went down because you lived them, this is actual lived experience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's just so much to it from a technical standpoint and, having the right equipment that feels out of reach for someone like myself who plans to, like, indie publish, small press publish,
Mm-hmm.
or, self-publish. So I love that amount of intentionality that you have with your authors and making sure that you're helping them deliver a product to the readers that they can be super proud of.
I think it's
Do you get
important.
much reaction, and follow-up from your authors? Like, are is there a level of, like, you blowing their minds? 'Cause I'm so excited, gives the, listener some insight. You've actually recently recorded this last week a snippet of my memoir,
Yeah.
and we will put that on the end of this episode so that
Oh, I love
listeners can hear
that.
that if that's okay with
Oh,
you.
that's fine with me.
Um,
What a great idea.
yeah, so I'm so excited to be able to have a chance to hear it and, like, feel my story come alive, and I just can imagine that that must give authors, like, tingles. What kind of feedback do you hear from your authors as present to them their audiobook?
Everyone's a little different. But for the most part, I get just the most incredible messages from authors. I usually on Instagram. I feel like that's where we all chat. Um, it just every time I get feedback like that from an author that's so positive and they're just so grateful for the work I've put in and for our journey together producing these audiobooks, it just reaffirms my decision to take the time to get to know them and their story. You have this memoir that you are publishing, and the reality is I try to treat a lot of books like a memoir because
Mhm,
most authors who are writing first person in any genre are really drawing on things that they've gone through in life. Um,
mhm.
I've talked to authors about that over and over again, where these hard things that they have weathered, they've, really used their book as an outlet to channel it into something that they can put out into the world and share with people in a way that's, you know, therapeutic or just, healthy for them to process and relate to others who've gone through similar things, even in a high fantasy context, right? So,
Absolutely.
so I think that most books should be treated that way with that kind of reverence and respect. And and one thing, there are plenty of memoirs out there not narrated by the authors. I just listened to one. Oh, it was incredible. It's called Educated by Tara Westover, and it was narrated by Julia Whalen, who I'm such a fangirl for. She's incredible, but I don't know. I was thinking about that as I was listening to this audiobook recently, that really the elements of the memoir are in almost every story I've narrated as I've gotten to
Mhm.
know the authors I've worked for, not just as, their clients or they've hired me, but many have become friends. And I just can't say that enough. Like that book, it's
I
fantasy,
love
but it's
that.
real.
I love that. And yes, it's such a good reminder because we talk about that all the time on this podcast about no matter whether you're writing memoir or you're writing fiction, there's so much of personal narrative that goes into writing. There's so many therapeutic elements that happen as you maybe in fiction explore an alternative ending than what you experienced in life. And maybe that
Yeah.
gives you a sense of resolve
Mhm.
on something. And it's beautiful. And I love that you shared that perspective with us.
Yeah.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about the different types of narration because I didn't realize there were all these like solo, dual, duet, and how that could affect potentially the time frame or the cost of the ultimate audiobook and how you then work with other narrators, what all that looks like.
Yeah, happy to. I've gotten to a point. So when an author reaches out to me and wants an estimate for their book, I now include at least three of the types on the estimate that I include. I include the solo, the dual, and the duet. And I've done that because it usually sort of, if they don't know the difference between dual and duet, it makes them ask.
I don't know the difference. Please share with
Let's do
us.
it. So, solo narration is obviously one narrator reading the entire story start to finish. And it's most appropriate in a book that doesn't have multiple POVs. I
Mhm.
have narrated books with multiple POVs as a solo narrator, and I probably won't do it anymore because while I'm very proud of my male voice, it's just better to have a male narrator on for the project. So
Can
that's,
we hear a sample?
sure.
Will you do our male voice for us?
Yeah, let me pull something up. I have to have a script. This is one of the Fem Audio Takeover snippets. All right, so let's see. Here we go. I quite enjoy the look of wrath on you. There we That's like the
Oh,
one line.
nice.
That's the one line. And then he says, like, I see you've been practicing with your power, goddess. So, it's a fun little party trick.
Okay, so that is that a part of solo narration then?
Yes.
Changing your voice to do like the dual POV?
W- yeah. So it's anytime, any character, solo narration, I'm voicing all of them, regardless of
Mhm.
POVs, if the author has asked for solo narration.
Okay.
Um, and if there are alternating POVs and they've asked me to narrate solo, then I'll adjust my voice to a degree for the narrative to give it more
Mm.
of that feel. I won't go as extreme as I will for the dialogue, but I'll still try to capture that masculine essence. But
Mhm.
again, I'm probably not going to do those anymore. Those, at the bare minimum, if there's alternating male and female chapters, will at least be a dual narration, which is where you
Mhm.
have two narrators, typically one female, one male. Not always the case, but two narrators. And they each they narrate every character within their chapters. So, like
Okay.
in the female POV chapters, I'm narrating all the characters like solo narration. And then my co
Okay.
narrator in their chapters narrate all the characters.
So then you're dividing like chapter by chapter. You're
Mhm.
not doing the female dialogue in their chapters. They're
No,
not doing the male dialogue in your chapters. It's just you can kind of divide and conquer by chapter.
correct. So that's dual. And what happens in the background during the prep is we will talk, we'll discuss character voices together. Usually we'll have like a Dropbox or a Google Drive folder. And as we collaborate on those voices and create them together with the instruction of the author, because we're given character notes and we're both reading the book before narrating, we'll upload each version of our voices to somewhere where we can reference them. So I can hear, oh, what's his version of this male character's voice? And then he'll listen to, oh, how is she voicing that female character? And it will inform our acting decisions and choices as we encounter those characters in our POVs.
Mm-hmm.
And then duet. So duet is, again, typically two narrators. And regardless of POVs, the female narrator is covering all of the female characters, and the male narrator is doing the dialogue for all the male narrators. So if there is alternating POVs, I'm still doing the female dialogue in his chapters and vice versa. So, so that's duet, and that's very, very popular with readers right now. And then you have multicast, and then you have audio dramas. So multicast, you might have maybe a handful of narrators and 3 or 4, and each narrator has maybe a couple voices that they're responsible for. I just finished recording an audiobook, and there's 3 narrators on it. It's me, Brandon Francis, and Anthony Palmini, and I'm the lead female main character. Brandon is the lead male character, but that's the only male character he voices. And then Anthony comes in and he's voicing all the random guards or, just random male characters that pop up in the story. So it's going to be really fun. And I would call that, I don't know, a multicast, a duet multicast. I don't really know what it's called, but we did it and it's cool.
That sounds cool. Yeah.
Then we have audio dramas, which would be like a graphic audiobook production, where every single character is voiced by an individual voice actor. No crossover.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like the editing to compile it would be extensive.
I can't even imagine. And then you're adding in the music that they do, and it's so much. But the end product is incredible. Their marketing slogan is a movie in your head, and it's accurate.
So, as we've talked through those solo, dual, duet, are those like increasing in expense
For
the most part?
Dual
Okay.
and solo are very similarly priced.
Okay.
There might be like some narrators will charge maybe a $200 prep fee for the extra collaboration to match voices as closely as possible. But the per finished hour rate, because audiobooks are charged based on the final runtime, that will be very, very similar to solo. Almost no difference.
Okay.
Duet is a little bit more because the audio has to be stitched together. Most of the male narrators I work with are on the opposite coast from me. And we're not on camera together. We're not on Discord. I've worked with all of them enough to get a real feel for how they read a story and vice versa. So when I'm recording a duet narration, I'll skip their lines, and instead of reading it, you get to hear this lovely noise. And what that does for anyone with any kind of savviness with GarageBand or any kind of audio recording is it creates a vertical line where that dialogue goes. So then when our files get sent to a post-production engineer, they have these visuals that mark every line of dialogue. So it makes it a little bit easier to stitch in his dialogue into my chapters and my dialogue into his chapters if this is a multiple POV book. Um, but it still is sitting there in, matching the audio levels because we have different recording setups. And then, yeah, weaving it all into a cohesive sounding audiobook.
Wow, it's so impressive. I think this is gonna like be so informative to
Good.
people like me who, have not had to go into this step yet. Let's see, what do I want to ask? How do your authors justify the costs of the audiobook? Is it because they know they have they're writing in a genre that's really big in audiobooks? Like, I imagine like romance genre is big for audiobooks. I'm sure fantasy is probably big for audiobooks. Or is it the way that they promote it that helps them justify the cost of both having print books and an audiobook?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different schools of thought. First off, most people can agree that marketing your audiobook is deceptively hard. It's
Okay.
something it's kind of hard to figure out. Um, it needs to be marketed equally with the other versions of your book. But as far as how people justify the cost, um, there's people who want audiobooks because they are avid audiobook readers and
Mhm.
they want to make money with it, but they're also just passionate about it. So maybe they'll do a Kickstarter campaign to help fund it, or they'll just save for years. I do payment plans for authors, try to make it accessible while me still getting paid fairly. There are the people who just do it because they love it and they just love that their book can be accessible in these other formats and they want it to be accessible. That's their priority.
Mhm.
Um, and then you have the people who are a little bit more business minded, like, okay, if I get an audiobook produced, not only is that another product that I'm getting income from, you
Mhm.
can pull snippets from it for marketing. And those snippets, if you make reels with them, can help sell the other formats of your book too.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
I mean, how many times did we hear the Rune Dannon, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae? And then we all heard it, right? When that was the big trending sound, right? And I mean, if you can find some parts of your audiobook that really catch your reader's attention and it can generate sales. I think genre has a lot to do with it. Most of the books I narrate are somewhere in the romance genre, some sub part of it, whether it's contemporary or fantasy romance. I think that's a big factor. It's definitely easier to market your audiobook if there's a love story in the heart, at least on social media. But if you look on Audible, there's audiobooks in other genres that are really successful too. So I don't know. I just know that when I do produce an audiobook for authors and then I don't see it getting marketed, it's like, what are you doing? Use it. You have this very expensive marketing tool full of audio clips that you could use to help push your work. Use it. I want it to be successful and I do what I can to help. I don't have a huge account, but I do have a hype team of about 30 audiobook readers who will sign up for advanced listener campaigns, will share release day posts, will share book reviews that are positive only. We do what we can to get the word out there and come alongside the authors I work with and support them in that way. Um, so I don't know if that
I
answers the
think that's
question.
it does, and I think that's such a great reminder, Jackie, that you sure, there's an additional cost with this, and now you have an additional, format to sell your work in, but you can use that for marketing. It's the same thing that when we talked to a cover designer that she talked about, yeah, do
Absolutely.
it ahead of your book being released and then make the cover design reveal like a marketing thing,
Absolutely.
like it's all, visual or it's audio, whatever these different, modalities of marketing,
Mhm.
like use them to the maximum because you're already paying for it anyways, and
Yeah.
it might help justify some of that cost
Mhm.
if you're then able to spin it for marketing purposes.
Yeah, I'll also, if authors reach out and ask, like, I'll do TikTok lives. Excuse me. Like I said, I'm in between books right now, so I'm on a bit of a vocal rest break. I'll do TikTok lives with them if they send me promo snippets that maybe are for future books in the series, or I'll do promo
Mm.
snippets before the audiobook is released. I do everything I can to be a supportive resource for the authors because I know these books are expensive.
Yeah.
I know it's expensive to produce, and I want authors, when they work with me, to feel taken care of and to feel like they got, the most bang for their buck. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So my last question before we close for today is
sure.
what is that lead up time? How far in advance of a publication date does an author need to be reaching out and starting this process of auditioning narrators and choosing what they want for their audiobook?
I think a minimum of 6 months. At least I would say my peers are very much the narrators who are part of the bookish community on Instagram and TikTok. And I feel like that's probably the minimum um, in advance that you need to initiate the conversation. But I would just say as soon as possible. Um, and I really do think that finding narrators on social media who are, if having that collaboration and that additional marketing that you get just from working from someone who's showing up regularly on their platform, if that's important to you, I would reach out as soon as you know that they're the right voice for your character. Um, a lot of the authors I talk to, um, maybe they don't even want an audition for me. They've been following me for a while, and I feel like they're their character to them. And I've heard that from many narrators where there's no audition. They're known as an established narrator, and they feel like a character for the author. And it's a very emotional decision. And so I would say if you're an author and you have a voice in your head and you find a narrator who is all green flags, um, that you would love to work with, reach out as soon as possible. Ask them for a quote, ask them about their availability. Um, you asked earlier, Elizabeth, about what questions should authors expect to get from narrators when they reach out. The questions would probably be mainly word count. Um, if you are wanting to hire 2 narrators, an estimate of the breakdown. How many of those words are going to be for the female narrator? How many for the male? I'll ask about how many POVs are there, because that's going to include a little bit of extra prep time. What style of narration do you want? What genre is your book? Are there any accents that appear in your book? Do you have an ideal publishing schedule? Is there a target date? You're reaching out 6 months in advance because your book is releasing in 8 months. And you want to try to have, you know, simultaneous release. Okay, I read too much romance.
I
Do
love
you,
it. Ah,
oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
no, it's great. I love a candid moment.
But you want to have matching publication schedules.
That's the clean way of saying it, Jackie.
Gosh, I almost made it through the whole thing. Um,
Too funny.
uh,
All right. Well, where can people find you? I know you said you're on Instagram. Where give us your website and we'll also put all of that in the show notes as well. But I want authors who are interested to be able to connect with you.
sure. Instagram and TikTok, I'm under Jacci Prior Narrator, JACCIPRIOR Narrator. And my website is www.jackiprior.com. And I've got samples on there. I have a form for authors to fill out, like an inquiry form if they want an estimate or if they have questions. I'm also on Threads, and I actually just discovered that there is a DM on Threads. Is that
It's
new?
new.
Okay.
It's new.
I got an author reached out to me there, and I was like, when did this happen? Cool. So I will eventually funnel you over to email. That sounds terrible, funnel. But for anything that needs to be remembered later that's pertinent to the
Mhm.
production, it'll happen in email because DMs are too hard to scroll through. So,
Absolutely.
so yeah, those are the places.
Well, thank you for being here today, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'd like to present the listeners with Jacci Prior narrating a scene from my memoir. My book is called Lonely Girl, and this scene is called Coffee on the Window.
There's coffee on my window, Mama. Ember's voice chimed from the back seat. That's not... I paused and turned around to see what Ember was talking about as the realization hit me. In my distraction of getting her buckled while updating my sister on the recent relationship whiplash, I had abandoned my coffee cup on the roof of the car. I had intentionally sought out that hot vanilla latte, viewing it as a reward or token of self-care after a mostly sleepless night of anxiety and worry about Heather's latest career confession and the impact it could have on our family. Even though the cascade of worries and mental negotiations had me carefully analyzing our family's finances, I had used the last dollars in our Starbucks account to buy the latte. I needed to prioritize myself in a time when Heather wasn't. In that wave of realization of the lost latte, I couldn't hold my emotions steady any longer. I relayed to my sister what had just happened. She encouraged me to turn around and buy a new one, even offering to Venmo the funds. But I couldn't face the embarrassment of walking back in, now with tear-stained cheeks and red eyes. The disappointment was current, but the tears were laced with thoughts and concerns that had been circling all night, like hungry vultures waiting for the last signs of life to fade so they could feast. The latte had been a temporary lifeline, and it was ripped away. They were tears of mental and emotional exhaustion as I wrestled simultaneously with how to move forward, and also why Heather and I seemed to keep ending up in the same spot. Why does this keep happening, Sissy? I pleaded. It's not fair, she responded in solidarity. Becca knew all about the revolving door of ideas Heather had presented to me over the past year, and my previous attempts to support them. She had to watch from the sidelines as I struggled to keep my footing on the ever-crumbling foundation of our marriage and shared vision of the future.